For 3 weeks, the billionaire's deaf son hadn't stopped crying. No one, not even the best doctors, therapists, or sign language experts, could reach him, until a poor boy walked into the mansion and did something unthinkable. Inside the stark white mansion nestled in Silicon Valley, there was a sound that rendered everyone helpless. The sound of silence that knew how to cry. Ethan Sinclair, 8 years old, sat hunched in the corner of his playroom, his small hands trembling as they moved through the air, as if trying to say something, but the world around him was completely deaf. It wasn't that he lacked a voice. It was because no one understood his language anymore. For 3 weeks straight, Ethan hadn't stopped crying. Not the kind of crying for a toy, but the kind that got stuck in the chest, as if something inside him was breaking apart. The best doctors had been called in, psychologists, sign language specialists, each one left with the same hopeless shake of the head. No one could reach that little boy. Standing at the doorway was Ethan Sinclair, the man who made all of Silicon Valley tremble, now powerless as a child before his own son. His $1,000 suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened, and his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. He had tried everything. Therapy, music, sedatives, and even interpreters paid thousands of dollars an hour. But Ethan just sat there, sighing in despair as if speaking to space. "Son, talk to me. Tell me how I can help you." His voice cracked, echoing through the silent room. Ethan lifted his head, eyes lost and unfocused, then turned away, continuing to sign through his tears. Jonathan felt his heart being crushed in someone's fist. Ever since Laura, his wife, had died in a car accident, everything had fallen apart. She had been the only one who truly understood Ethan, the one who had learned sign language even while pregnant, the one who used to say, "When you can't hear the world, I'll be your ears." But now, Laura was gone, and with her, Ethan's world went silent too. Jonathan had once believed that hiring interpreters would be enough, but what they brought were precise gestures, not genuine love. They signed every word, but not with feeling, and Ethan, the boy who listened with his heart, sensed it instantly. Day after day he kept crying, and the more he cried, the more Jonathan feared, not because he couldn't stand the sobs, but because he understood that each tear was washing away his son's last memory of his late mother. And so it went, 3 long weeks, in a home full of luxury, technology, and people. Yet no one could hear the silent cry of a child. At one end of the city, a deaf boy was trying to tell the world he was breaking. At the other end, a poor boy was about to do the unthinkable, to change the billionaire's child's life, simply by listening. While in Palo Alto, a deaf boy was slowly sinking into silence. On the other side of the city, a woman was struggling with her own despair. Angela Hill, 36, sat in the waiting room of the employment center, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes weary. In front of her lay a thick file filled with red marks and notes. Interviewed, rejected, lacking qualifications. "I'll do anything," she whispered, almost to herself. "Cleaning, cooking, laundry, anything. I have a son to raise." The case officer looked up and sighed. "There's one position left, but it's in the wealthy district, Palo Alto. Full-time live-in position. The family is rigorous." Angela hesitated. She had worked for wealthy people before. They were always demanding, sometimes cruel. But then she looked at the small photo of her son tucked in her wallet and nodded quietly. "I'll take it, no matter what." That afternoon, her son Marcus Hill, 13 years old, was sitting on the front steps waiting for his mother to come home. Thin, bright-eyed, He held a sketchbook in his hands filled with drawings of sign language gestures. Hands, smiles, eyes. Marcus had learned sign language from Chloe Rivera, a deaf girl in his class. 2 years earlier, when Chloe first transferred to their school, everyone laughed at her, kept their distance. But Marcus had walked up to her, smiled, and signed a greeting. From that day on, he practiced every movement, every expression, not to show off, but to understand her, to speak in a language the heart could hear. Chloe once told Marcus, "You know, deaf people don't need pity. We just need someone willing to listen, with their eyes and heart." That sentence carved itself deep into Marcus's memory. That evening, Angela came home holding a new work contract. "Marcus, I got a job," she said, her voice trembling with joy and nerves. "I'll be working for someone named Ethan Sinclair. He's wealthy." Marcus let out a low whistle. "How rich, Mom?" Angela gave a faint smile. "The kind of rich where the front gate could be bigger than this whole apartment." But her joy was mixed with unease. "Listen to me, Marcus," she warned. "When we get there, don't wander, don't be curious. Rich people don't like the poor touching their world." Marcus nodded, but his gaze drifted off, toward the twilight sky, painted with shades of purple and hope. He had no idea that just 1 day later, he would step through the gates of that mansion himself, and forever change the life of the billionaire's son who cried silently. The next morning, an old bus carried the mother and son to Palo Alto. The gates of the Sinclair mansion opened, tall, cold, and breathtakingly grand. The polished marble reflected their silhouettes, and in that heavy silence, Marcus suddenly heard something. A sob, distant, but filled with despair. A sound only someone who knew loneliness could recognize. Marcus tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mom, I hear someone crying." Angela shook her head, fear tightening her voice. "That's not our business, Marcus. I need this job. Don't get involved." He lowered his head, but his feet stayed still, as if something invisible was holding him back. Not curiosity, but instinct. The instinct to help someone who was hurting, the way he once had. "Mom," Marcus said softly, "sometimes, just having one person who listens can save someone." Angela fell silent. And in that moment, neither of them knew that those very words would become the red thread connecting two worlds. One of wealth and silence, and one of poverty, but with the gift of listening. Marcus stopped at the foot of the grand staircase. That cry was no longer just a sound, but a voiceless plea for help. He could feel it, not through his ears, but his heart. Upstairs, echoes drifted through the halls. Footsteps, sighs, and then the tired voice of a woman. "We've tried everything. The boy doesn't respond. It's as if he doesn't want anyone near him." Marcus felt his heart tighten. He didn't know why, but something deep inside urged him to advance. He began walking, softly, but with a certainty that came from the heart. Through an endless hallway, past elegant yet lifeless paintings, until a door slightly ajar revealed the scene inside. There, he saw the boy. A small child sitting in the corner, eyes red and swollen, his tiny hands moving nonstop, fast, frantic, desperate. 3 adults stood around him. A nanny, a therapist, and a sign language interpreter trying to sign something. but the interpreter's gestures were stiff, hollow, like a memorized lesson. Marcus knew instantly. The boy didn't understand them. Not because the language was wrong, but because their hearts weren't in it. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Hey, what are you doing?" the nanny gasped. "You can't be in here." Marcus didn't answer. He just looked at the little boy. Instantly, it was as if they recognized each other from two lost worlds. Marcus raised his hand slowly and signed. "Why are you sad?" A simple gesture, but in that moment, the world stopped breathing. Ethan froze. Tears still streaked his cheeks. His eyes widened in disbelief. Then, those small trembling hands began to sign back, fast, clumsy, desperate, like a dam breaking. You understand me? You can see me? I want to watch the videos of my mom. Before she died, she recorded them for me. But my dad hid them. He said they make me sad, but I need them. I'm scared. Scared I'll forget how her hands used to move. I'm scared I'll forget her. Marcus couldn't hold back his tears. His eyes shimmered as he signed back, gently, every motion filled with feeling. I understand. I used to be afraid of forgetting my father's voice. All I could remember was his laugh. And even that faded over time. But sometimes, remembering is how we bring them back, even if only inside our hearts. Ethan stopped. For the first time in 3 weeks, he didn't cry. He just looked at Marcus for a long, quiet moment. Then suddenly, he rushed forward and wrapped his arms around him. No words, no sound. Just 2 heartbeats syncing as one. 2 small hands intertwined in silence. The entire room fell still. The interpreter lowered his hands. The nanny covered her mouth. And at that very moment, the door burst open. Ethan Sinclair, the father, stood frozen in the doorway, his eyes locked on the scene before him. His son, the boy he hadn't been able to reach for 3 long weeks, was hugging a stranger and smiling through his tears. No one spoke. Jonathan simply stood there, his heart baking, not from pain, but from a spark of hope reignited. What's happening?" he whispered hoarsely. Angela, the mother, rushed in from behind, her face pale with panic. "Mr. Sinclair, I'm so sorry. That's my son Marcus. He didn't mean to, he just—" But Ethan was already signing rapidly. Tears are flowing again, yet they are not from despair this time. He signed toward his father. "Dad, he understands me." Jonathan looked at his son, then at Marcus, before turning to the interpreter. What did he say?" Marcus turned back, signing while softly speaking, his voice trembling but sincere. "He said, someone finally understands him." No one in that room moved. Even the air seemed to freeze. Ethan Sinclair, the man who once made hundreds of employees tremble with just a glance, now stood still watching his son, the boy he'd been powerless to reach for 3 weeks, wrapped tightly in the arms of a stranger. A poor boy, but one who had done what every doctor, expert and therapist had failed to do. Marcus still knelt beside Ethan, his hands moving softly, each sign flowing like a gentle lullaby. You miss your G. You miss your mom, don't you? Ethan nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks. I'm afraid I'll forget her. Marcus smiled, signing back. I understand. My dad passed away too. I used to be so afraid of forgetting his voice. I was so afraid that I wouldn't even dare to fall asleep, because I thought I might wake up and forget that sound if I did. But then I realized, when we keep someone in our heart, they never really leave. Ethan looked up, eyes glimmering, and in that moment the loneliness of both children melted away. One had lost his mother, the other his father, and both had found each other through the same language, memory and love. Jonathan stepped forward, his voice trembling. What's your name, son? Marcus, sir. Jonathan knelt, looking directly into those eyes. Eyes without fear or pleading, clear and steady as water. You can understand, my son? Marcus nodded. Not just understand, sir. I can hear him. Not with my ears, but with my heart. Jonathan froze. Those words, simple yet piercing, struck straight into the place he had forgotten existed. His heart. Suddenly, Ethan began signing rapidly, his breathing quick, his hands shaking. Marcus understood immediately. Sir, he says, his chest hurts. It's been hurting for days. Jonathan dropped to his knees in panic. Ethan, what's wrong? Call the doctor now! When the doctor arrived, Ethan went silent again, speaking only when Marcus sat beside him. The 13-year-old boy became the only bridge between a child who couldn't speak and a world of frantic adults who didn't know how to listen. Marcus translated each sentence slowly, clearly, with a calmness that amazed everyone. After the examination, the doctor turned to Jonathan, his tone grave. Your son doesn't have a heart condition, sir. This is psychosomatic pain, caused by severe anxiety and emotional trauma. If this continues, the consequences could be serious. He paused, then added, and to be honest, this boy just saved your son. Without him, we might have been too late. Jonathan looked at Marcus, then at his son, unable to speak. Ethan held Marcus's hand and signed softly. Thank you for hearing me. Marcus smiled, signing back. You're welcome. Because once, I needed someone to hear me too. Jonathan turned away, quickly wiping a tear. For the first time since his wife's death, he cried, but not from pain, from gratitude. Because in that very moment, he had witnessed a miracle, one that came not from money or technology, but from the kindness of a boy who had nothing except a heart that knew how to listen. Jonathan sat down, gazing at his son and Marcus. He whispered almost to himself, sometimes we have to lose everything before we learn how to listen. Marcus smiled, replying in both sign and speech. No one is truly deaf, sir. Some people just haven't learned how to listen with their hearts. Jonathan laughed, a sound tangled with tears. It was a small smile, but it was the first after so many silent months. And something miraculous had happened in that mansion once filled with cold, echoing emptiness. A poor boy, through kindness and pure empathy, had saved not only the heart of a child, but the soul of a father who thought he'd closed himself off forever. That afternoon, after the doctor left the mansion, Jonathan Sinclair stood quietly at the doorway of his son's room. The golden light of sunset fell across his shoulders, casting long shadows over the deep lines at the corners of his eyes. Lines carved by exhaustion, regret, and something he had been too afraid to admit for the past 6 months. Fear. Fear that he wasn't a good enough father. Fear that his only son was slowly slipping away. Fear that no matter how much money he had, he could never buy back his child's laughter. Ethan had fallen asleep, his face more peaceful than it had been in weeks. Beside him, Marcus sat quietly, watching the boy with gentle, protective eyes. Jonathan stepped closer, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Marcus," he said softly, "thank you. You saved my son." Marcus shook his head. "I didn't do anything big, sir. I just talked to him in the way he could understand." Jonathan was silent. After a moment, his deep voice softened with sincerity. "Can you teach me?" Marcus looked up, surprised. "Teach you sign language, sir?" "Yes. Teach me how to talk to my son." From that day on, every morning before the stock market opened, Jonathan Sinclair, the man who once ruled an empire with his time, sat at the breakfast table with Marcus, learning each sign. At first his fingers were clumsy, stiff. His gestures were disjointed, just like the way he had lived, always trying, but without emotion. Marcus patiently corrected every motion, every glance. "It's not just your hands, sir," he said. "You have to use your face, your feelings. Ethan doesn't just watch your hands. He reads your heart through your expression." Jonathan chuckled, half embarrassed, half moved. "You speak like someone much older than you." Marcus replied softly, "Sometimes kids have to grow up early, if they want someone to listen." That line left Jonathan quiet for a long time. He looked over at his son, sitting in the corner, smiling as he watched Marcus sign. That smile, small as it was, lit up the entire house. Marcus accidentally found a small metal box inside Jonathan's study drawer one evening. Inside were several old discs, labeled in a woman's handwriting, "For Ethan." He looked at Jonathan, his voice trembling slightly. "These are the videos his mother recorded?" Jonathan nodded. "Laura made them before she passed, but I never dared to watch them." Marcus said quietly, "Maybe it's time." They opened the laptop. On the screen appeared Laura Sinclair's face, kind, gentle, her smile warm, her hands moving gracefully in sign language. "Ethan, my son," she signed. "If you're watching this, it means I had to go away. But don't be sad. Every time you sign, 'I love you,' I'm still in your hands." Tears streamed down Ethan's cheeks. Marcus sat beside him, translating each line for Jonathan. His voice trembled, but each word was clear. "She said that Every time Ethan signs something, she's still alive in it. Each movement of his hands is a heartbeat. Jonathan's voice broke. Oh God. I hid them because I was afraid it would hurt him more. But maybe I was the one who couldn't face it. He leaned down, placing a trembling hand on his son's shoulder. My son. I'm sorry. Ethan looked up at him, then sighed slowly. What are you saying? Jonathan turned to Marcus for help. Marcus smiled gently and showed him. This is the sign for I'm sorry. Jonathan repeated it, his large, awkward hands moving carefully but full of sincerity. For the first time in half a year, Ethan cried. Not out of sadness, but because he finally felt understood. He wrapped his arms around his father. Jonathan whispered, signing as he spoke through tears. I'm here, son, and I'll keep learning until I can hear every word you say. From that night on, the atmosphere in the mansion changed. Mornings were no longer silent. In the middle of the expansive kitchen sat 3 people. A billionaire, a housekeeper, and a poor boy, sharing breakfast, signing together, laughing together. Marcus taught Jonathan new signs. Ethan occasionally corrected his father, and both burst into laughter. Angela, Marcus's mother, watched from a distance, smiling through her tears. She understood in that quiet moment that sometimes her son didn't just change other people's lives. He saved their souls as well. That night, the mansion was silent as always. Only the silver moonlight spilled across the polished floor, casting the shadow of a father sitting alone, reading through pages of handwritten notes on sign language. Ethan Sinclair sat there, focusing on every gesture, every facial expression. He wrote in a small notebook, language isn't just words, it's emotion. It's the face. It's the eyes. The clock ticked in the expansive room, and then a sound shattered the stillness. A scream, Ethan's voice. Jonathan leaped to his feet and ran upstairs. The door burst open. Ethan sat upright amid tangled sheets, his face pale, his forehead soaked in sweat. His hands flailed wildly in the air. He was dreaming, or rather, reliving the night of his mother's accident. His hands moved frantically, signing in panic. Car, Mom, it hurts. Save her. I couldn't help. Jonathan rushed forward, wrapping his son in his arms, his voice trembling. Son, it's me. Wake up, Ethan. But Ethan kept signing, trapped in the nightmare. Jonathan froze, because for the first time he understood. Without an interpreter, without translation, he knew exactly what his son was saying, not through words, but through feeling. He took a deep breath and remembered everything Marcus had taught him. Then, with trembling hands, he began to sign, slowly, deliberately, one phrase at a time. You're safe now. I'm here. I won't let that happen again. And your mom. She loves you. Ethan stopped. His eyes widened. Tears rolled down his cheeks. He looked at his father for a long, silent moment, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Then slowly, his small hands began to move. Dad, you can hear me now. Jonathan smiled through his tears. He held his son close, signing gently against his back. I'm learning for you. I'll keep learning until I understand everything you want to say. Ethan placed his hand on his father's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and signed a sentence that Jonathan would never forget. I don't need a perfect dad. I just need one who listens. That night, the Sinclair mansion was no longer cold. In the dim moonlight, two figures held each other, a father and a son, speaking no words, yet understanding more deeply than ever before. Angela, Marcus's mother, stood quietly in the hallway, watching through the crack of the door. She smiled softly and whispered to herself, "Sometimes God doesn't send angels with wings. He sends a child who knows how to listen." The next morning, Jonathan told Marcus everything. He couldn't hide his emotion. His voice still shook. Last night I realized my son was never truly silent. I just wasn't listening the right way. Marcus smiled, his eyes lighting up. "I told you, sir, no one is truly deaf. Some people just haven't learned how to listen with their hearts." Jonathan laughed, this time a genuine, warm laugh. And for the first time in months, the home of billionaire Jonathan Sinclair was filled with the most beautiful sound of all, the laughter of a father and his son. Since that night, the Sinclair mansion began to change day by day. Mornings were no longer filled with the heavy silence of lonely footsteps on marble floors, but with the sound of Ethan's laughter. Marcus's voice was chatting cheerfully, and Jonathan's deep, awkward attempts at spelling words in sign language. The three of them, different in every possible way, age, background, status, shared one thing in common. They had all known loneliness. And now, they were learning how to fill that emptiness with something human. Angela, Marcus's mother, continued her quiet work around the house. But every time she saw her son playing with Ethan or teaching Jonathan a new sign, her eyes softened, a mix of pride and worry. "Marcus, remember," she whispered one afternoon, "rich people can be kind, but they live in another world. Don't hope for too much, or you'll get hurt." Marcus just smiled. "I'm not hoping for anything, Mom. I just want Ethan to have a friend." But the world never lets good things stay easy. One weekend morning, a woman appeared at the mansion gate, elegant, cold. A white coat, dark glasses, the poised confidence of someone used to giving orders. It was Victoria Sinclair Reed, Jonathan's sister, and the second heir to the empire. She entered the dining room where Jonathan, Ethan, Angela, and Marcus had breakfast together. The sight stopped her in her tracks. A billionaire sitting beside a poor black boy, and a housekeeper seated as an equal, all laughing together. "Jonathan," Victoria said sharply, her voice tinged with disdain, "what on earth are you doing? You're letting the help eat with you?" The air turned heavy. Ethan put his bowl down, staring at her. He didn't need words to understand what that tone meant. Jonathan answered calmly, "Victoria, they're not the help anymore. This is Marcus and his mother, Angela. They've done more for me and Ethan than anyone else in this house." Victoria arched an eyebrow. "Helped you? Jonathan, have you completely lost your mind? You're letting your son play with the maid's boy?" The moment the words left her mouth, Ethan slammed his hand against the table and stood up. He couldn't speak, but his hands spoke for him. His signs were sharp, fast, furious. "Ethan, calm down," Jonathan urged. But Marcus already understood. He turned to Victoria and said slowly, clearly, every word deliberate, "Ethan says, you're being rude. You don't understand. My mom and I aren't the help. We're his family. And if you can't be kind to his family, then maybe you should leave." The room fell utterly silent. Victoria's face flushed red, her voice cracked with outrage. "Jonathan, are you seriously letting that boy talk to me like this?" Jonathan stood, his gaze steady but firm. "No, Victoria, I'm not letting him talk to you like that." He paused, just long enough for the words to sink in, then said quietly, but with steel in his tone, "I'm letting him be right." Victoria glanced around the room, eyes blazing, then turned sharply and stormed off, her heels striking the floor like iron against stone. No one at the table spoke. Ethan's face was flushed, his small hands trembling, and Marcus gently placed a hand on his shoulder, signing, "You did the right thing." Jonathan looked at the two boys, one of his sons by blood, the other by heart, and felt something unfamiliar stirring inside him, a mix of pride and awakening. That evening, Jonathan called everyone to the living room. Ethan sat beside Marcus while Angela stood quietly off to the side. The air was still, the soft glow of the lamp falling over Jonathan's thoughtful face. "Patricia, Marcus," he began, then caught himself. "Oh, no, Angela, Marcus. I've been thinking a lot. You came here as employees, but what you've given us, no one else could." He looked from Ethan to Marcus, his voice low but steady. "My family used to have everything, except love, patience, and the ability to listen. You brought that back to us. So, I don't want to call you employees anymore." Angela looked at him, bewildered. "Mr. Sinclair, I don't understand. Do you mean—" Jonathan interrupted gently. "I want you to stay here, not as staff, as family." Marcus looked up, eyes wide. Ethan turned to him, his hands moving eagerly. "Please stay. You're my brother now." Angela burst into tears. "Mr. Sinclair, we're just—" Jonathan shook his head, smiling. "No, I'm the one who needs you, not the other way around." The room fell into a deep, peaceful silence, broken only by Ethan's laughter mixed with soft sobs. And that night, a new kind of family was born, not bound by blood nor defined by wealth or titles, but by gratitude, love, and the simple, sacred act of understanding one another. 6 months had passed since that day. Spring had returned to the trees surrounding the Sinclair estate. Gentle winds, warm sunlight, and the sound of laughter filled the garden, a sound that, for a long time, this place had forgotten. Today was Ethan's 9th birthday. The garden was decorated with blue and white balloons, the colors his mother, Laura, had always loved. The birthday cake sat in the center of the table, surrounded by children, some who could hear and some who could not. But all of them were communicating in sign language. Amid the crowd, Marcus stood smiling, his eyes bright with joy. He helped Ethan organize games, teaching the new kids how to clap with flying hands, the way the deaf community celebrates applause. From a distance, Jonathan and Angela watched them, their faces glowing with quiet pride. Jonathan said softly, "I used to think birthdays were about gifts and parties, but today I understand. They're about the people who make you want to live another year." Angela smiled, replying gently, "See, people don't need miracles. They just need someone to see them and to listen." As golden sunlight poured down, Ethan stepped onto a small stage in the middle of the garden. He stood there, hands trembling slightly, but his eyes shone bright. Beside him stood Marcus, ready to translate his signs into spoken words for everyone. Ethan took a deep breath, then began to sign. Marcus stood beside him, his voice steady and warm, translating each word. 8 years ago, I was born deaf. People said I was broken. 6 months ago, my father and I couldn't talk. I thought I was alone. Ethan paused, looked at Marcus, and smiled. But then Marcus came. He didn't see me as the deaf kid or the rich kid. He just saw me as me. Marcus's throat tightened, his voice breaking as he translated the following line. Marcus is my brother. Not by blood, but because he gave me my voice back. He gave me my father back. And he gave me hope. The air fell silent. Then suddenly dozens of hands rose into the air, waving gently, the soundless applause of the deaf community. It was a moment so beautiful it hurt to breathe. Jonathan stepped forward, signing and speaking at once, his deep voice trembling yet full of warmth. When my wife died, I thought my family had been shattered forever. I tried to fix it with money, with logic. But I couldn't buy the one thing we were missing: understanding. He paused, looking around, his eyes resting on Marcus and Angela. You both taught me that true strength doesn't come from power, but from kindness. Angela, thank you for having the courage to walk into this house when I was nothing but a man still breathing without a soul. And Marcus, thank you for teaching me how to be a father again. Ethan ran forward, wrapping his arms around both of them. The three of them held each other tightly, amid the wind, the laughter, and the sea of hands waving softly in celebration. A poor black boy, a billionaire's son, a father, and a single mother. 4 people from different worlds bound together by the only thread that never breaks: love. As the party wound down, Jonathan pulled Marcus aside to a quiet corner of the garden. His voice was calm, low, but filled with emotion. You know, Marcus, I once had everything. But it wasn't until I met you that I understood what it means to have enough. Maybe God sent you here to save Ethan and me. Marcus smiled, eyes gleaming. I only did what anyone can do, sir. What's that? Jonathan asked softly. To listen. With the heart. Evening settled in. Ethan and Marcus sat on the front steps, signing stories to each other and laughing. Jonathan and Angela stood in the distance, watching the 2 boys. 2 souls who had once been alone, now brothers. A gentle breeze drifted through, carrying the sound of laughter, quiet, warm, and honest. And perhaps that was the moment happiness truly came home. 5 years had passed. From the grand Sinclair mansion to the narrow streets of Oakland, time had carried change in every breath of the 2 boys from long ago. Marcus Hill was now 18, Ethan Sinclair, 13, radiant and full of life. They were no longer 2 lonely children from opposite worlds, but brothers, growing, laughing, learning together, and fulfilling a shared dream: to bring the language of compassion to forgotten children. At his high school graduation, Marcus was chosen as valedictorian. He stepped onto the stage wearing a blue gown and a calm smile. Ethan sat in the front row, raising his hands in a sign of congratulations. Marcus met his gaze, then began his speech, speaking and signing simultaneously. When I was 13, I met an 8-year-old boy, a boy who couldn't hear or speak and thought the world had forgotten him. But that boy taught me the most important lesson of my life: that everyone has a voice. It's just that sometimes the world is too loud to listen. The auditorium went silent. Marcus looked down to the front row where Ethan stared back with proud, gleaming eyes. Ethan Sinclair is my brother, Marcus continued. Not by blood, but because we chose each other. Through kindness, through understanding, through the belief that love knows no boundaries. And every day, he reminds me that the miracle is not in making others hear you, but in learning to listen to them. The audience rose to their feet, a sea of waving hands, deaf applause. Ethan jumped up, signing excitedly, "That's my brother!" The hall burst into laughter, through tears. 3 years later, their story was told again, not on television nor in books, but inside a small house in Marcus's old neighborhood. A wooden sign hung on the gate, Coleman and Sinclair Center for Deaf Children, a center for therapy and emotional support for deaf children. Marcus, now a child psychologist, and Ethan, a psychiatrist specializing in deaf youth, had turned their childhood promise into reality. The two sat in a therapy room, surrounded by laughing, signing children. A little girl, about 7, signed awkwardly, "Dr. Ethan, can I ever talk like everyone else?" Ethan smiled, signing back, "You don't need to talk like anyone else. You just need to speak in your own way." Marcus stood beside him, pride in his eyes. "See," he said softly. "Now it's your turn to help others hear with their hearts." Ethan grinned. "Not just me, brother. We do it. Together." That evening, the 4 of them gathered again in the backyard. Jonathan, Angela, Marcus, and Ethan. On the table was a simple dinner. The warm light casts peace across faces now marked by time. Jonathan raised his glass, his deep voice soft and calm. "My children, I was once a man who had everything. But it wasn't until I lost it all. My faith, my voice, my love, that I found what was truly precious." Marcus asked gently, "What was that, sir?" Jonathan smiled. "Understanding, listening, and love, without a name or title." Ethan added in sign, "And that's why we're all still here, together." Angela placed a hand on Jonathan's shoulder, saying nothing, just smiling softly. And in that quiet moment, 4 people from 4 different worlds realized they had finally found a true home. The next day, Jonathan attended the grand opening of a new foundation with his 2 sons by his side, the Sinclair Foundation for Deaf Education. On the wall at the main entrance was an inscription, a quote written by Ethan, translated by Marcus. "Every child deserves to be heard." Jonathan stood there, eyes shining with quiet pride. Ethan and Marcus looked at each other and signed together, a message they had carried in their hearts for years. Love doesn't need ears to hear. It only needs a heart to feel. That afternoon, during the small reception that followed, Ethan stood up before the crowd. This time, he didn't just sign. He spoke. The sounds were imperfect, broken, but full of courage. "Marcus taught me that being different isn't a flaw. That being rich isn't about having money. Being rich is having people who understand you." No one said a word. The room filled with tears and soft applause, not loud, but tender, in the quiet language of hands raised in the air. Ethan turned toward his father and signed one final sentence. "Thank you, Dad, for learning how to hear me." Jonathan's hands trembled as he replied, Thank you, son, for teaching me how to listen with my heart. 5 years. 2 boys walked from the lonely corners of 2 worlds to a place where every barrier was broken by compassion. Marcus and Ethan, brothers not by blood, but by soul, left the world a simple, timeless truth. In a world full of noise, be the one who listens. If this story reminded you that kindness still exists, share it. Let its small light reach someone who needs it. Because sometimes, one act of compassion is enough to change an entire life. Thank you for watching until the end. Like, comment, and subscribe to Deep Life Tales for more stories that touch the heart.